All right, well, let's get another question here. This was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Mick Woods in Silgo, Ireland. Hello, Jim. I was a huge fan of the Headbangers during the Attitude Era. They were my favorite tag team. I thought they were great workers and had excellent chemistry. I have 2 questions in regards to them. 1, you mentioned on a recent drive-thru of seeing them in a small promotion prior to their WWF stint. Were they portraying a similar heavy metal rocker gimmick at this time? Or was it something completely different? And question 2, I thought both guys were good workers, but Mosh/Chaz always stood out to me. I thought he was excellent in-ring and should have been given more time to wrestle under the subsequent Chaz gimmick and not that beaver cleavage shit. I'd be interested in knowing whether you thought Mosh or Thrasher were the better worker/star.
Well, it's not fair to say one was better over the other because neither as a single got a chance, you mentioned one of those gimmicks, to really do anything. But how I saw them was, no, they were completely different. I've told this story before, but we got new listeners. Both guys had been wrestling as a tag team for Dennis Coralluzzo up in New Jersey because both guys are from the Northeast. And they were a masked team called the Spiders. Do you remember, you saw them on some of the spot shows that Dennis ran when you started going, right?
Yeah, and I think actually originally it was just Glenn Ruth as the Spider, and then they became a tag team.
Yes.
The Spiders.
Glenn was the first Spider, and then Chaz crawled right up next to him. But anyway, they knew that I had a relationship with Dennis, and I was on some of Dennis's shows, so I could see some of the guys. And obviously that's where I'd found Candido and Tammy, and so they had sent me a tape and we had talked. You know, they wanted to go to a territory. I think they had tried Memphis for a short period of time. It didn't work out, whatever, but there wasn't really a lot of other territories to work at that point. They spent some time working for Burt Prentice when he had something going out in, God, it was at Missouri or wherever, Kansas. Anyway, I liked them as workers and as people. I just didn't have a spot, and I wasn't crazy about the masked Spiders. And then Cat Collins, my friend who was working for Rick Rubin, he's the one who introduced us. Cat was coming to Knoxville with Glenn Danzig, who was a big wrestling fan. And I think Rubin was either on Deaf American Records or Rubin was going to do something with his.
No, Rick had produced him. I mean, when Rick Danzig went solo, Rick was his producer. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
And he was on Deaf American Records. Yeah.
Well, thank you. See, I knew you'd know that. But anyway, Kat said, hey, you want to come to this concert in Knoxville? I'm going to be there. We can hang out, whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, I had never really listened to a lot of Glenn Danzig, but, the heavy metal type of stuff, right? But he's a nice guy and a big fan and the whole 9 yards. That was all great. But the opening act, and it wasn't at the Knoxville Civic Coliseum. This was at a building I'd never been to before or since in Knoxville that they had these concerts in, where they had the mosh pit and the headbanging going on. I was unprepared for this. I was thinking I was going to see a rock concert. I didn't know I was going to see a goddamn legalized riot. Because the opening act is this guy comes out and he's wearing combat boots and a fucking skirt and this weird makeup, and there's chains and shit and piercings hanging all over him and the people in his band, and everybody in the fucking building looks exactly the same. And he's dead. I can't fucking. I'm not in the crowd. I'm over behind the equipment cases, back behind to the side of the stage, right? Because I said, and I'll go out and piss in the alley instead of going in the bathroom with these people because. Holy shit, this is a wild-looking crowd, and I'm used to the wrestling crowds in East Tennessee. But these people were off their shit. And this guy on stage, combat boots and the fucking piercings and the goddamn skirt and the whole 9 yards, at one point he stops what he called singing and says, when I count to 3, I want everybody in the audience to spit on me. 1, 2, 3, and everybody in the audience spits. And of course, past the first 2 rows, everybody's just spitting on the people in front of them. And I'm like, there's a fucking gimmick here somewhere, right? And the guy's name was Marilyn Manson. But we didn't know that at the time because he was opening for Glenn Danzig. This was 1994 or whatever. So I said, there's a gimmick there. These fucking guys wearing cowboy boots and skirts with piercings and fucking black eye makeup on and these fucking heavy metal rock and roll fucking thrash metal t-shirts. And I went and bought a couple of magazines. I don't even remember what the titles of them were anymore. But what was that style of music, Brian, at that time? What would it correctly be called?
I'm not exactly sure. What would you call Marilyn Manson? Crap?
Well, I mean, besides crap, I mean, was it heavy metal or was it death metal or was it?
It's not death metal.
Thrashing and
it's kind of, it maybe could be called heavy metal, but.
Okay, well, they had the people in the mosh pit. I'm asking Kat, I'm like, look, there's a beef broken out. They got a big Hey Rube going on. I said, no, they're dancing. I said, they're fucking punching and slamming into each other. That's what they do. But anyway, I said, there's a gimmick. There's a gimmick here. And I got the magazines and I looked, and that's when it hit me, Glenn and Chaz, the Spiders. I hate the gimmick. What about if they were the Headbangers, Thrasher and Mosh? And they fucking wear skirts and combat boots and at first they got fake piercings, but then as Chaz especially, I think, went farther with it and had some shit put in, and the black eye makeup and the weird. And so anyway, I called them and I got both of them on the phone together. They were on separate lines, and I said, guys, I've got a spot for you. And they're like, wow, yeah, that's great. I'm like, but you need to wear dresses. And there was the silence, like, is he? Because this was before this would be a question or a statement that would be made. I guess now it wouldn't be surprising. But they were waiting for me to say, no, I'm just ribbing. I said, I'm not ribbing. I said, but here's the gimmick. And then when I told them the gimmick, and I said, go get the magazines. And they already had some tag team moves, which they did great in Smoky Mountain. It just, a lot of them got fucked up in the WWF because of the fact that the ring was 10 times as hard as my Smoky Mountain ring, and they were using real ropes, so it threw their shit off. But that power bomb combination leg drop off the top, they called it the stage dive. They nailed that every time in Knoxville. It looked great. And they would do the slam dance thing where they'd shoot the guy off and jump up in the air and hit. It was the old ass bump, right? But they got the gimmick and they did the interviews like these crazy slobbering fucking heavy metal fans or whatever. The point is, it was a great gimmick for Knoxville and for a territory. And they were heels because look at them. Most people in East Tennessee didn't want their children to grow up looking like the Headbangers. But then when they went to the WWF, by then it was a couple years later, and all those type of acts were on the top of the charts, and they were more babyface, and they were more smiley, happy babyface shit. But yeah, they both could work. They were both great guys. They made the most out of the gimmick. I'd never dreamed it would go to the WWF. I was doing something to give them a spot in a territory to get them some experience. But then later on in 96, when I was up there, we needed tag teams. The tag team situation was the shits. And of course, with Vince not giving a shit about it, they'd make it worse. They buried Tom Pritchard and Chris Candido as the Body Donnas. But I said, well, what about the Headbangers? Well, what should we call them? I said, what about the Headbangers? Well, we can't use their name and gimmick. I said, it's my name and gimmick. I gave it to them. So if I say it's okay, can you give them a job and use their gimmick? Oh, okay. So I had to, like I did with D'Lo Brown, I had to sign the paper. It's my idea. Only thing is I lied with D'Lo. I told him to come up with a name and he came up with it. But if they'd have known that, they wouldn't let him use it. So I told him I came up with it and signed the fucking paper. But anyway, so that's how they got up there. I always liked them, never had a problem with them. They were fun. They got me one lawsuit in Clarefield, Tennessee, but that's the guy fucking laid hands upon them first. So otherwise I couldn't say anything bad about it.
How does that work with the paperwork you signed? I'm intrigued. Because obviously D'Lo Brown still calls himself D'Lo Brown, and I think the Headbangers still called themselves the Headbangers at various points after WWE.
I don't know whether I even have a copy of it or not, but it was a very short more like not even a release, but just like a fucking 2 or 3 line document. I hereby certify that I came up with the intellectual property name and Zabada and give the WWE the right, or F at the time, the right to use this. And I don't know whether they even know or remember that they but really it only gave them the right to use it during the time that they were under contract anyway, because I couldn't sign the guys rights away in perpetuity. But besides that, it got them a job, so who gives a shit? What are they going to do now? Ask them for a refund on all the money they've made since then?